So welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to the to our carbon audit webinar. The order of play is that I'm going to start. I'll be very, very brief. Just a wee bit of background to the carbon audits and how they fit into the whole farm plan. And then Cara's going to talk about the farm carbon calculator tool. And then Christine and Valerie are going to talk about the AgriCalc tool. And then we're going to have questions after that. Just quickly, I'm not going to dwell on this because obviously we've got to focus on the carbon audits, but the whole farm plan comprises 5 plans, two of which you'll need to complete by the 15th of May 2026. This is only required if you claim basic payments and greening and for new schemes such as FFIS. So if you did a carbon audit last year, which you probably didn't as you're here, if you did a biodiversity audit last year, you wouldn't need to do another one for another 4 years, 5 years from when you completed it. And the same goes for a soil analysis. If you completed an animal health and welfare plan last year for your SAF, you would need to do that again. But you do only need to have 2 valid audits for 2026 for this year's SAF. You'll only ever need to complete audits that are relevant to your croft. So if you keep livestock, you will, by 2028, definitely need to have an animal health plan in place. Everybody will need to have a biodiversity audit and a carbon audit in place, but that's by 2028. If you use pesticides, you'll need to have an integrated pest management plan in place. And if you claim Region 1 land that receives applications of artificial fertilizers and or organic manures, you'll need a soil analysis by 2028. That doesn't include applications of seaweed. So the carbon audit itself, you can complete your own carbon audit using one of the recommended online tools, which 2 of which are going to be demonstrated tonight. Your carbon audit must be aligned to the PAS 2050 standard, and these 2 tools are aligned to that standard. Your carbon audit should include recommendations for what you could change on your croft, is what Scottish Government is saying, which could come from the tool you use, but that is a little bit problematic. I think not all the tools actually offer that. You can pay an agent, which is not really the idea, or you can do your own research online. For the whole farm plan, you only need to carry out audits and plans that are relevant to your crofting activities. As I've said, you should be able to carry out all relevant plans yourself without paying an advisor, including the carbon audit. And it's not required to demonstrate improvement year by year, which is interesting. You may already be doing everything you can, and that Scottish Government have accepted that. So although this year you only need to have 2 plans in place, by 2028, all those that are relevant to your croft would need to be in place. And although now it's only relevant if you claim basic payment and greening, or if you're applying for the FFIS, in the future it is possible that it may also apply to other funding such as CAGs. So I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to Cara.
Hi everyone. Presentation, I can cover most things, but it's really difficult to know what to cover because there's actually quite a lot of information within these toolkits. And I've put this together. This is from my own experience of doing the carbon calculators. I have actually done both. So I've done the AgriCalc and I have done this one. As I go through it, I will try to talk you through bits I have found helpful. And again, we will talk about why I have actually chosen this as being my preferred tool for using for my carbon audit. Just to give you a bit of background, so we're based in Lerg, well, just on the outskirts of Lerg. We're up in Shinnes. So we've actually got almost like a his and hers croft. So I've got my croft and my husband has his croft. My croft is currently 47 hectares. And we've been sort of crofting here for, well, coming at 22 years now that we've been crofting here. So we are predominantly sheep and grassland, and we have been very active since day one in sort of, trying to maintain grassland and things like that. So I found doing the carbon audits actually quite interesting to see what the results were coming back as. So what I'll do, like I say, I'm hoping I've covered everything, but if there is something I've missed out, please do just feel free, to pop a question in the box, or like I say at the end, I'll try and answer as many questions as I can. I'm not guaranteeing I know the answers, but I will certainly see what I can do. So firstly, why carbon audits matter. Obviously now, it is a requirement as part of the whole farm plans, but also I think it's a good tool for us now to be able to identify, what are the benefits. Now there's a lot of talk around economic benefits. Again, I'm still a little bit unsure as to where those economic benefits are coming from. We've, as I said, been crofting for 22 years. We've always tried to improve our grassland, improve our sheep management and flock management and things like that. We have introduced pigs and we introduced cattle recently in the last sort of probably 4 or 5 years now. So we are seeing our land uses changing slightly. We have more farmyard manure now, so we're using that on the ground and things like that. So so that's maybe where some of these economic benefits come from. Again, it knocks into the whole basis of soil health, that if we can understand, what our ground is storing and what we're releasing and what we need to be putting back in, that, inevitably, will improve soil health. And I'm a firm believer in that you would not build a house on unstable foundations. And I believe that in the point of soil health as well. So I think soil health is actually fundamental to, especially if you're growing grass for feeding sheep, because at the end of the day, grass is the cheapest form of feed that we can actually provide for our livestock. So, it's hoping that these carbon audits will help with our soil health. They're also saying that it will highlight the inefficiencies on our farms. Again, as we go through, I will show you some of what was highlighted here, and we can talk a little bit more in terms of that. It says as well, it's aimed at improving farm resilience. So again, I'm taking from that in my own personal role as a crofter is that, if I can understand how my land works and, again, the inputs, the outputs, that hopefully, that will mean that, when we have flooding, when we have droughts, things like that, that we can be more resilient and be able to tackle, the implications of what's happening on our crofts. It also says here that it helps farmers play and crofters a major role in combating climate change. So again, I think if we're talking about environmental factors, hopefully again, if we're understanding, what's happening on our crofts, this will actually help us make improvements for the future. So as I said, I have done both. But why did I choose to do the farm carbon one? So I initially did the AgriCalc, and to be honest with you, I wasn't satisfied with the results. I thought it was very generic. So I then investigated this, and the one thing that I found about it is that it was exceptionally easy to use. I've put that it helped me to understand the farm emissions. It did, but I still have questions. But again, what I have found with the website is the website has a fantastic resource section. Again, it says that it identifies the opportunities for you to improve efficiencies. And I think as well that what we need to think about as well is that when we're actually carrying out our carbon audits, it's the results that it's gathering. It's actually looking at what are the direct emissions, the indirect emissions, and other emissions. So we can break all that down. So for instance, the direct emissions, it's what's that fuel looking like that we're burning on the croft, when we're say making hay and all this type of thing. We talk about livestock methane and things. Then we've got the indirect emissions. So if some of us have got, byres and livestock sheds and things like that, we're using electricity. So that's what the classing is, their indirect. And then we've got other indirect. So it could be that, it's these, if we're transporting, stock from one field to another field, all these factors come in. And so the idea behind this is that by using these measures, in the calculations, it can, help us to identify how we can make those, if, efficiency improvements. And again, it says that it supports sustainable crofting. So what is the Farm Carbon Calculator? So firstly, it's free, and I genuinely, honestly feel that it is designed for all of us to be able to use. I'm quite a visual person, and I like to think that if I can go into something and I can't understand it, that I can get almost like a direct help system. And that's the one thing that I found with this. And I think that the terminology and the jargon that's actually used within the carbon calculator, I found is very simplified. It's not using big words that I didn't understand, so for me it was very simplistic, which I think is really, really important, because sometimes, we get asked to carry out audits and tools and things like this. And actually, when you start looking at the language and some of the, sort of the acronyms that are used, what are those acronyms? What do they mean? And it can be very, very confusing for a user to do that. Whereas this I found was very simplified. The other thing as well is that it calculates the whole farm. So you can put in all the detail and it will calculate the whole lot. And then at the end, it creates a really simple report, which again, as I go through, I will try to show you some of that information. Now, when I say it creates a simple report, what it does is it takes all your information and it pulls it in. It doesn't actually create a final report that says to you, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So that's the one thing we just need to be clear that it doesn't give you that at the end. So for those of you that have maybe seen it or not seen, so this is actually the front page of the website. So you go in and you've got straight away, you've got start the calculator, you've got the resources, there's a calculator service as well, and there's lots of information in here. So when you go in, what's going to happen is it's going to ask you to register your details. So you're going to go in and you're going to log in and you're going to register and you're going to start inputting some of your details. And what's really good about it is that it's got these sort of like drop down categories that you can do. So the first thing it'll ask you is, is your address and, your login details and things like that. And then what happens is then you start getting into this sort of farm details area. So what you can do here is that you can basically click all your enterprises that you do on your farm. And this then is what starts building up your report. So for instance, we keep beef, cattle, we've got pigs and we've got sheep. So I've just ticked those boxes there. If you're doing something else, you could putting that in there as well. I haven't ticked upland grazing, but we potentially could put upland grazing into that as well. And again, depending on your location, you've got lowland grazing. Now, you'll see that there's these little green circles with the I for information buttons. They're fab because you can actually just put your mouse over those and it opens up into these little dialog boxes. And so it gives you straight away a really good little introduction as to what that information is that it's seeking from you. And again, if there's help that you're needing, there's normally a little box that you can click and it will take you straight through. So then again, then it comes down into wants to know more now about actually your farm area. So, if you've got some arable and you're cultivating, you would put in the quantity of cultivated area into there. Your grassland, so I put 47 hectares there if you're not doing any crop, so you can just keep inputting. For this demonstration here, I kept this really simple, but you can fill this all through. And then it takes you in then to, so this is a demo one that I've done just for the website here and for the presentation tonight. But what you see then is that once you've moved on from that page that you were on initially, you've got all these categories. So you've got fuel, materials, inventory, crops, inputs, livestock, waste disposal, distribution, suspension, and processing. And what you do with all of these is that you have to click on every tab. So you click into fuels, and then what you do is you go over to your add new. And then what it will do then is it will ask you, so if you're running your tractors, for instance, on red diesel, your quads on unleaded and things like that, you would add all of those in. So what you do is that you just keep adding them in. So you just, you put tractor, red diesel, add new, quad, and I did, and you would just work the way down. If you've got a vehicle, if you spread over, X amount of, ground and you're running a vehicle back and forth between fields and things like that, you can put in, a vehicle for running. And again, if it's diesel, whatever, and you would add all that in. And then you can add little notes into all of this information as well. When you are finished with that, you have to tick the box that's down the corner here that says mark as complete. And when you do that, then that's when it would then take you through to the next section. So you would basically be working your way along all of these tabs. So again, your materials is, that, if you are buying in bits and pieces, if you maybe, renovating something on the farm, all of these type of things that you be putting into there. And again, there's an inventory in there as well of, all the bits and pieces that you have. If you're cropping crops, so even for grassland, for instance, if you've got grass seed, all this type of thing, you'd put all of that stuff in. So what I've done is I've jumped across here to livestock because I think for the majority of us, it's probably the livestock tab is the most important tab here. So what you can do here is that you click into your livestock, and again, then you start breaking it down. So in the same way as what we did before, where you add new, add new, add new. So in here, you put livestock, sheep. I've put in there for the process of this, I've put ewes. I've given them a label. So these are my breeding ewes. I've put this 42. And what it wants to know is how many of them you have. Sorry, the reporting period is, so I've put 52, so it's a year. So that reporting period is a year. Then it's how many have you got? So there I've put 120. What is the average, weight of my sheep? So I've put 67 kilograms there, and you can start working down. Now, what is really good and something that I really like, and I've just added this in at the bottom here, is they've got this livestock wizard. And I like this even from a recording point of view for the whole year. So you can actually go in, you click on this livestock wizard, this tab here, and then what it does down below here, it opens up this calculator. And what you can actually do here is that you can actually start adding in, so especially those that are like, say, new into crofting or new into keeping sheep and things like that, what you can do is you can actually record all your inputs. So, month one, you've maybe been to the market, you bought 10 breeding ewes. You can add all this information in. It could be then that, 3 months later, you've sold, I don't know, 20 lambs. So you can add all this stuff. And what it does, it keeps a rolling calculator. And it's a fantastic tool. And I think that especially what I like about it is that we're part of QMS, and we're part of, with our animal health schemes and things like that. And I like this because I just keep this on the computer and I just fill it in as I go along, throughout the year. So I use it as actually a bit of a recording device, but actually this automatically then links into my livestock records here. And what you've got then up here is you've got this, like, the KPI details. So again, it's, the livestock they bought, what your sales weights were and all this, and you can work all this to from bits and pieces out. But if you've actually got your carbon calculator and your livestock calculator operation in the background, it will just extract that information straight out of there, and it'll actually put it into your carbon calculator. So I really like that. So if anybody, I'm not really a fan of spreadsheets, but this I quite enjoy doing. So I would recommend going and having a look at the Livestock Wizard. So like I say, just for the example here, I've just put in breeding news, but then like I say, you can go in and you can add lambs. You can, if you've got, wethers that you just keep for maybe, keeping grass down or whatever, you can just input all your different classifications as you need. And then it moves on then. Sorry. And it starts asking you then, it wants to know more information. So then it starts asking you about the livestock feed intake. So again, the great thing here is that, there's terminology used in here in terms of, DMI and things like this. And people go, what does that mean? So this is your dry matter intake. Now you go like, what on earth is dry matter intake? Now, if you've been on other courses, you may be aware of these things. But again, what it has this fantastic little grid here that you get this out of your resources tab, or you can click again on your livestock feed tool tabs here, and it brings up these charts. So it will tell you roughly what sheep, cattle, etc. are eating per day. So you can go, right, I've got, 10 sheep and, and you can just quickly work out that calculation and put that in and save it. And then it'll actually take it all the way through and it'll actually work it all out for you. So again, this is what I quite like is that, you're coming through something and you're like, oh God, I have absolutely no idea how on earth would I even begin to start doing that. The fact is, it gives you the tools to do it, so it actually makes it really, really simple. So once it started to do all of that, it then starts collating these charts. So what I've done here, so this is an example of my croft here. So what it's done, so I've worked through all those tabs that were back at this. I'm going to see if I'm clever enough to take you back a minute. Oh, that might come back that way. Yeah, so all these. So what I've done is I've gone along and I filled in all my tabs. So for instance, my waste disposal. So we gather up all our plastic. We've got one of those great big Solway bins. We put all our plastic in the Solway bin and then it goes off. We get a weight for it, things like that. So I keep that weight because again, we're QMS. So we have to have that. So I've got that. So again, in that tab, I would just put, plastic disposal from my bale wraps. And I pop that in, pop the weight in, and it'll work it all out. The distribution, that is more around what you're doing in terms of the comings and goings of your croft business. Now, the suspension there, so this is all to do with your soils. So now, frustratingly, I didn't actually fill that tab in. So when I come off this, and I'll take you into the website and I'll show you. So the suspension here, so this is understanding what is your soil organic matters and your soil carbon matter and all the rest of it. So those of you that have done soil analysis, you will have some sort of figure that you will be able to put into that and that will help with the calculation. And then your processing, that is all about, so if you're putting lambs off to market or you're buying and selling and things like that, it asks you all the questions about, how many you're selling, and takes all those numbers through. So it's taking all that information and what it's doing then, it's working out these calculations here. So what it's done there, for me, it's worked out my emissions. So I'm 14.49 tons. Now my removals is less. Now the reason my removals is less, so I've got more going out, is that for me is that the year that I did this carbon audit, I was actually establishing a new flock of sheep. So I wasn't actually selling anything. So that's where my figure is actually slightly skewed because of the fact that actually, ironically, I wasn't selling any sheep. So that actually sort of did skew my figures ever so slightly. And then you can see then my carbon balance. And what it's done then is it's looked at your KPI, so your key performance indicators. So it's got the size of the croft, it's worked out my carbon balance. It's also worked out the carbon balance against the dead weight of it. I don't like the term dead weight. It's on about sheep that are actually leaving the croft. And ironically, it's not necessarily that they're dead weight because I'm selling my sheep live, but it terms them as dead weight bizarrely. And again, it works out the quantity of my sheep going off, and then it gives me this sort of dead weight sold number here. Also, it looks at my wool yield. And again, it is taken in my crops yield as well. So for us, we make all our own hay and silage. So that's where that figure is coming from. Again, I'm quite fortunate that, I don't have an over-reliance on chemical fertilizers because we use quite a lot of farmyard manure. So again, that figure is not too bad. But you can see there that some of the information that it's actually giving you. But like I say, I'll try to show you more when we go into the website in just shortly. So then what it's done, it's tried to break down where my biggest use is. So my fuels, I don't really have a great sort of, I'm not really running around in tractors and things like that. My inputs is low because again, I'm not buying in chemical fertilizers and things like that, but my livestock is high. But again, ironically, and this is the bit that does baffle me slightly on this, is that the livestock is high is because I don't or the year that I did the carbon audit, I wasn't selling really many lambs. I kept all my female replacements and I bought a whole bunch of females in as well. So that's where that figure was skewed. Now, the waste disposal, it was so negligible that it didn't even actually show up on the graph. And what I've got there as well is that the removals is in here as well. It's so we have got hedgerows that were planted. So that's actually showing there that the hedgerows are classing as a removals for the croft there. So it then gives you this chart at the bottom here. And so this is almost like a benchmarking. So it can tell me where I sit in terms of a region of emissions. So there it's telling me that my total emissions per hectare is 3.86 tons a hectare. I'm below the medium average value for this selection, and it puts me in the lowest 10% for the selection of data. So that's really quite reassuring for me. Now, what was very, very interesting was I said to you that I had already completed the Agrical, they're preparing for sustainable farming. I actually had a carbon audit completed and funded. And what was very interesting, again, when that results came in, I was just like, it was so high that I questioned. I was like, this is just ridiculous. You know, I'm a small craft. I'm not really doing very much. Why is my carbon coming out so high? So I actually had lots and lots of discussions, and again, they explained about the livestock and bits and pieces that some of the management that I was carrying out on the croft. And that's where I actually decided, actually, I want to go and do my own carbon audit and I want to go and see what the results. So what I actually did, I took the exact replica of data from the AgriCalc and I put it into this app, and I got two totally different readings. So that I found very, very interesting. But the information that I inputted was exactly the same information. The thing that is really, really important when you are working out or you're going to start sitting down and doing your carbon audit is that you need data to be able to put into there. So you've seen the tabs and you've seen the categories. So you do, and this is a really good exercise for you to get into the way of doing, especially if this does, it becomes something that is embedded and we have to do these on a regular basis. So the one thing that you need to do is you need to make sure you're aware of your livestock numbers. You need to know, what the average weights of your sheep are and different bits of it. So that is one key bit. Again, all your fertilizers, farmyard manures, you need to know all that information. All the calculators will want to know how much you've put on, whether it's artificial fertilizer or whether it's farmyard manure, slurry, whatever that might be, it will want to know the quantities that you've put in. So you need to be aware of all that information and try to work it out as best as possible. So have all that information to hand. Again, it will always ask you about the energy that's being used on your croft. So whether it's fuels, whether it's electricity, whether it's oil, whatever it might be, it will want to know. And again, it will want you to break it down into the different categories. So is it diesel for tractors? Is it diesel for machinery? Is it quads? Is it a vehicle running back and forth? Is it machinery that you are using, within the croft? So maybe you're split, maybe you've got wood timber and you're taking your own timber down and you're splitting it. All of that, it wants to know all this information and it will ask you all that information. And again, electricity that's used. So again, like as I said at the start, if you've got sheds, if you've got buyers, it will want to know, how much electricity is being used. And it doesn't matter whether it's this tool or the AgriCalc, and I know the others will talk about AgriCalc. And again, it will want to know about your land use. So, do you have peatland? What is your, your soils looking like? Do you have woodland? Is it arable? Is it grassland, etc.? And it takes all this information in. So this is what I had done. So all this information that I collated was the information I collated for AgriCalc, and it was all put onto a spreadsheet. So all that information was set. So I know that when I took that information and extracted it from the AgriCalc and then put it into there, I know that all that information was correct, because that was the first thing I was like, did I put something in wrong? Is that why my calculations have suddenly come in so different and so varied? But because it was all on the spreadsheet and because of the way that it had all been worked out, I knew that the calculations were correct. So like I say, so for me, it was very, very interesting just to see. Um, and to me, I feel that this is more representative of my croft as opposed to the figures that I'd had in the other tool that had been used. I also found the benchmarking was slightly different as well, which again, I'll show you when we go into the website, fingers crossed. So again, what are the benefits? So we've got there, so it supports the whole farm plan requirements. It highlights the opportunities to reduce cost. It improves the understanding of emissions. It supports sustainable crofting businesses. So how do you get started? So this is the resources page here, but let me just come back to the homepage a second. So as you'll see from the presentation, so this is the actual homepage. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you into my dashboard. All right. So you click up here into the dashboard. So you can see this was the wee demo that I tried to create for you just for your presentation. But this is my actual one from 2024. So again, so this is, some of the charts that I showed you when in the presentation. So that's that information there. But what you've got in here. So here, so this hopefully will give you again a better understanding of what it's asking for you when you are working through your tabs. So for instance, in here it's my fuels. So it wanted to know the description. So I've put diesel, red diesel, how many liters was I using? So I've put in 150 liters. And then what it does when you're actually going through your information, it will ask you almost like what your confidence is. Because sometimes, we're not 100% sure, so if it says you how much farmer manure did you put out, you're like, oh, I don't know, it's like 3 bucketfuls. I'm not really sure how much that is. So you can't always be 100%. But with the red diesel, we have, because obviously we've got our bills and things like this, and we know how much we're putting into the tanks and that. So here I could say my confidence was quite high that, it was 100% that this is what I was using. And then again, then we come down to the crops. So here I've got, so perennial grasses. And again, so it's like, what did we harvest? How much did we take off the fields and things like this. So again, we can work all these bits and pieces out. And then it's got your inputs here as well. So because I couldn't get the precise fertilizer mix that I put in. So I couldn't give it 100%, although it's saying it's 100%, but it's not actually got the 3 ticks, because what I've done is, I've done it in a way that, this is what it's given me as a chart. And I've gone, yeah, that's close enough to what I've put on there. And again, then we've got our cattle feeds here. And again, it's this thing with the confidence is that, it's just, again, I'm buying it from, say, Migdale stores. I can't 100% guarantee that, again, when I am inputting what I'm feeding my livestock, that it is actually 100% matching with what this app wants or any of the apps are actually asking me for. So, all I can really say is that, oh, yeah, it was an 18% crude protein mix. And yeah, that looks like it's close enough to what I was feeding. And again, working out roughly, how much was I feeding? And again, in terms of, the haylage and things like that. And again, we talked about the breeding ewes as well. So again, there it's, quantity of sheep. I'm trying to work out roughly, how much they were getting ahead. And again, then this comes down to like your waste disposal and things like that. And then this is then when we start getting into the suspension. So we've got hedgerows that have been managed. So we put in the length and the meterage and all the rest of it. So again, what this app does is it works it all out for you. So you put, how wide is the hedge? How long is the hedge? How old is the hedge? What's the density of the hedge? And then it gives you a calculation and it works out sort of this, tons of carbon, etc. And it works it all out for you. Now, again, I'm slightly skewed on mine is, so this SOM inventory, this is to do with going into the tabs. So what it does, it asks you, do you know if you've had your soil analysis completed, there is always a figure that you now get as part of that, and it'll tell you, what is the percentage of organic matter that's in your soils and things like that. So it really wants to know those figures. My soil analysis was out of date, so what I've done is I've kind of guessed. So it's not 100% accurate. Now, this year, we are getting all the soils redone. So the next time I do my carbon audit, it will be more accurate in terms of that. So this, though, is your soils organic matter inventory here. And so again, so this is in 2023 and 2024. I've just kept it the same because of the fact that, I actually, haven't done it. And again, just going back to 2020 and 2022. And so what it's done is it's asked me how much organic matter is in my soils. I've said there's approximately 75% organic matter, which is, like I say, it's a bit of a guess. And you'll see here there's no figures because this is to do with your carbon and that is stored in your soils. Again, when you now get your soil analysis completed, it will give you a reading on the carbon that is available in your soils, and that is the figure that you would input. My soil analysis was out of date, and at that stage they weren't doing that, so hence there's a gap in this information. So as I now move forward, I would like to think that, my carbon audits will become more accurate. Because like I say, there is information that I know is absolutely fine, but there is information that I know has been a bit of a guessing game with it.
I was just wondering, would you include like tree plantation in your sequestration section? That was
I
quite
would,
well.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would.
And would you just benchmark it off the number of trees planted and when?
Yeah, so there's actually a really good, again, calculator. So if I come into the resources, so when you come into the resources here, there's bits about your land use. So you can go into there and it will give you quite a good set of data and information and guides, especially, if it's not just grassland and it is wood and things like that. And again, you've got your soils carbon guide in here as well. That sort of talks you through, sort of again, just, trying to figure out, different bits and pieces and calculating and taking samples of soils and things like that. So there's lots and lots of bits of information in here. So if you haven't done something and you're like, oh God, I want to put some sort of figures in, they have got the guides in here that will help you. So just try and use a lot of the calculators that they've got. And I have to say, I hadn't been into this for, well, I think probably about 5 months since I was last in this. And then because of doing the presentation, I thought, I'll come back in and just refresh myself, and I thought, I'll have a look. And I have to say, actually, there's so much more in here now than what there ever was. And again, as I'm coming down, so you've got this where did it go? So they used to have this data collection spreadsheet. They've taken that out. They said that that's now got too big, so they've taken that out. But what you've now got, though, is all these methodology calculators, PDFs and things. So again, you can actually, put information in and it will help you calculate. So have a play around with that. And again, if you have got, woodlands, just again, I'm going to see if I can set up a new calculator. Hold on. Calculator, access calculator. Right, I'm going to see if I can just start a new one just to show you a minute. I'm just going to do it as a demo again. I'm just going to do 3 months. I'm going to ignore that. Report details. So I'm just going to do yes as a whole farm report. Yeah, next. So this is the tab that you've got here. So if you have trees, for instance, oh, I thought there was trees in here. What we'll do, we'll put that under non-cropping as such. So I'm just going to put 30 in there, and I'll put pen in here just now just to get something going. Save. Oh, it's not going to look so I'll put in here now. I'm just going to do standard. In crops, add new. So can you see here, you've got tree crops.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you can do is so you can actually pop that and then it will give you, so you can then sort of, say whether it's timber, firewood, Christmas trees and things. So you'd need to decide, are your trees going to end up being crops or are they just environmental? So if you come under your subscription that you were asking about, so you can actually in here, so you've got like woodland, agroforestry and things like that you could do. So you can pick what you think is best for you. And again, you can work out, is it average woodland, individual trees, agroforestry, etc. And all of these different things that you just click on and then it gives you, extra bits and pieces. You can just work your way through and then and it will just calculate it all for you.
Okay, so just stick to the sequestration section instead of adding it as a kind of crop.
Yeah, because
Okay.
unless you're going to take it off as timber, or like say Christmas trees, things like that, I think I would just stick it as that.
See on the waste disposal
Mm-hmm.
section, I noticed earlier you had it written down average plastic recycled for your silage wrap.
Yeah.
Now, I'm pretty sure my local disposal place doesn't recycle it. So I think they just landfill it. Now, I noticed that it had 0 tons for the carbon when you put it as recycled. If you put it down as landfilled, how much of a difference would that make to your carbon audit?
I'm not sure because we put ours down to, so we use Edmonton. We take it down to Edmonton near us. So we just do it as that. So I just put it down that it goes off as plastic disposal. I've just kind of done it like that. So yeah, so I just do it as this and then sort of, so you can see here where it's, recycled landfill and things like that. So like I say,
So if you put it
certainly
as landfill, would that suddenly spike your carbon?
it would be worth seeing if it did. Yeah. I think it probably would.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I think it definitely would. And you can see here all the different categories that you've got.
Like it's mine is a local council run one, and if I take
Okay.
mine, I get a waste invoice, obviously, waste note. But I don't know. I'd have to check to see if it says whether it's recycled or just landfilled. But
Yeah,
it's
because I
just in
think
case
ours,
anyone came back and compared it in the future, and then you were like, "Well, hang on a minute, your audit said you recycled it, but this says you landfilled it."
yeah. So here's the bizarre thing is, so at the moment, the Scottish government is not collating any data from your carbon audits. Not at all. They have no facility for actually. So this is the irony, and this I actually find this quite a sort of a strange thing that we have to do. They're encouraging us to do these carbon audits, but actually at the moment the Scottish government is not actually retaining any of the information. So in years to come, they're not going to suddenly come back to you and go, oh, you didn't do this or you did do that, and because at the moment they're actually not storing the information. So now that could change in a few years' time, but certainly at the moment, the Scottish government is not holding that data.
Which begs the question, what's the point of all of this?
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, this is I've asked that question several times. I do just feel that this is a tick box exercise at the moment. It's the government saying, "Oh yes, we're getting all farmers and crofters to complete carbon audits," but like I say, at the moment, that information is not being held anywhere. So you're producing these and you're going to have it as your physical record and you're going to tick the box when it comes to claiming your basic payments and you're going to say, yep, I've got a carbon audit and yep, I've fulfilled the whole plan, criteria. But at the moment, they are not holding the information. The way that I set out initially when I started doing the carbon audits. I started out initially, I was like, well, do you know what? I'm just going to do it as I think it is, and take it from whatever that point is. And then if they start then trying to implement efficiencies and all this type of thing, then I can say, well, okay, this is what I've done, this is what I haven't done, and oh, I didn't realize that. And you can take it from there. I've always, and when I'm working with crofters as well, I do say to them is, don't try to be over perfect at the moment, because again, should the time come when they do start, recording the information, we almost want to be able to demonstrate, because especially if it's going to end up being penalties and things like that, we want to be able to demonstrate that actually we can make efficiencies. But obviously we don't know which way that's all going to go yet. So, so like I say, I think just at the moment is, play around with these things. Don't get too concerned about them at this point in time, because like I say, the information is not being gathered and stored anywhere at the moment. But that's not to say that come 2028 or with a change of government that things don't change. But that's as it stands at the moment. The important things I would say is to make sure you gather as much information as you physically can, because when you then go to sit to do your carbon audit, if you've got that information to hand, it just means that actually, do you know what, within an hour and a half, you probably get it all done, no bother at all. But if you don't have that information to hand, then you're going to be scrabbling around and it's going to take a lot longer to do. And like I say, just create your first one. It may not be 100%, it may not be right, but you've given it a go, and and it just gives you something to question and just play around with and things like that. And like I say, going back to that question over the the recycling and things like that, it'd be quite interesting to do that exercise, just to change some of the data around and just see what spikes you get. And so yeah, so that is me then.
Thanks, Cara, and welcome everyone. My name's Valerie Graham. I'm joined this evening, separate locations. We're not at home together tonight with my mother, Christine Mackay. I've pulled together a brief presentation to take you through this evening. So I think, following on from Cara, the one thing that I would say is that we very much approach this as a right from the beginning as what does this mean? What does this look like? And what are we going to take from this? And how do we ultimately move this forward? And I think I don't know about a lot of you, but I certainly don't know much about preparing carbon footprint audits, or even understanding what some of the metrics that comes from the audit are, or what they're even telling me. So I think we approached this with a bit of an open mind, thinking, right, where do we start and how do we do this? The first thing that we did, though, when we started to think about our carbon footprint audit, was we actually did our soil samples first. So we got our soil analysis completed before we even thought about attempting to go online and look at what other information we needed to do, because we felt that that was the appropriate information that we would be required to have to complete our carbon footprint. So we followed Cara showed you the soil examples of how to take soil samples. I think that kind of information is relatively available on the internet and quite simple to do. I think we bought our soil kit off Amazon, and we used the university in Inverness to get us our soil samples, which came back, and probably, I think at the time, a lot of people were doing soil samples and we probably had to wait slightly longer, but it was no more than 3 to 4 weeks for our soil samples, which was, I actually thought was really interesting and really good value for us to think about how do we ultimately take that data forward into managing our grass. So we are quite a small croft. The croft is obviously my mum's croft, and I I'm probably a bit more technical minded than my mother, supported her in pulling the data together. But one of the things that was very good is Mum is very good with her paperwork. So her welfare and her initial farm plan details that she knows how many sheep we have. We know the approximate weight of her sheep. We know how much feed that we buy every year. We were able to distill that information quite quickly because her main farm welfare and health plan are all up to date to be able to utilize that information for coming online with the Agricul. Now, we chose the Agricul because Mum had attended one of these Scottish Federation seminars, and there was a guy who had come on to talk about carbon audits. It would have been probably a year or two ago, and he shared the Agricul. Now, at that time, it was free to use on a trial, but you could pay an additional £99 plus VAT if you wanted to access more benchmarking and validation and some different scenarios that you could upgrade the system. We decided at the time to not pay the upgrade because we were, using this as a bit of a training tool of, right, what is it asking? How do we do this? And for the minimum requirements of what we were enabling us to do, what the Agricul gave us was sufficient for where we wanted to be. And I think that, so if that was a tick box, yeah, it was a very good tick box to do. So I found the system quite easy to use. It was we received a login from Agricul through an email. We click through the email and it takes you to your front loading page, which I have attached now. You then click into the report data entry and complete all the data. So this is the front page of starting to input the data. So a bit like Cara's front page, we tick which enterprise sectors we have. Now, our main livestock is sheep, and we have poultry, and we've got grazing fields as our main entity. Now, a bit like the previous system, the main systems that you have to drop down and answer questions are on the three that I have identified at the top. Now, the main questions that you get asked on each of those, so the land and the crops was, again, the details, fertilizer and lime, and the imported organic matter and manures. We were able to find a lot of that kind of information through our soil sampling, and also how we deal with sheep manure and poultry manure. We were able to allocate into our answers there. With regards to our livestock, again, as I said at the beginning, because we have clear data of when we're purchasing, when we're selling, how many, if we've had any deaths, the number of livestock, our number of lambs that we had, the dates of when we sold everything, we were able to track exactly, putting in the required amounts, the amount of feed that we had purchased in the year, the amount of bedding that we bought in, and we were able to have all that. So we kind of collated all that information, and then we sat with the folder beside us and inputted into the system. Now, the energy and waste is all about your electricity and fuel, just the same as Cara was saying in previous. We don't really have, our sheds are not lit up. We have no electricity in any of our sheds. And we do like to use a wheelbarrow, so we don't have any quads on our crofts. We've got very little fuel used on the croft, so there wasn't too much information for us to add into that. Now, the way that this system works is you ultimately fill in the boxes with the information that you have. So when you click in your land and crops, this is a screenshot of your information that you would require. So where you have the first column is all about the size of your croft. And then the further boxes are around if you've got annual occupancy of seasonal land and any other data that you need to fill in. So ultimately for us, we're quite simple. I split out the rough and pastures and other yards that we have to give us our total of 7.63 hectares within our land. Again, when we come to our livestock, this is just a simple screenshot of how many sheep that we have and where, ultimately their manure and their poultry and what that looks like in terms of percentage numbers for the amount of usage that you have, the sheep using the different pastures that you have around your crofter farm. Then we go into the numbers of breeding ewes, lambs, and laying hens. We input how many of them, the numbers into simple boxes, completing. This one also has, like the one Cara was talking about with the little eyes. So you can click into anywhere where it's got an eye and a little circle. You would be able to click in and it would give you a bit more detail around what do you actually need to explain in those details. So you work your way through. This one again is all to do with the ewes, the lambs, and our hens. How many in? I think that was a bit of the most complicated. What's a dead weight of a laying hen? Was, some approximate numbers taken. I mean, even to get the number of laying eggs, Mam does keep how many eggs our hens lay every day in our diary. So we were able to just add that up from all the details that were already in the diary. So I think it is very important about being planned and organised before you are going into provide the information. Now, this one gives you a report. So this is a front page reporting. Ultimately, it tells you what your total emissions are and the majority of where that is coming from and what that could mean for you. It does also give you a PDF that you can pull off the PDF to be able to keep for your records, and it would be the PDF that you could have as your record should anyone ever want to ask for them. The PDF does go into a lot more detail. I've just screenshotted some of the guides to be able to show you here. I'm not as technical as Cara to be able to give you a live demo, to be able to show it in real time, but it gives you a brief understanding of what is the report is telling you. And then I think it is important to think about, well, what can you do and how do you take those next steps around? I'll just stop sharing there. So yeah, quite brief from us. I don't know, Mother, if there's anything you would like to add, but I found this system quite straightforward. We were back into it yesterday to pull off the presentation, and it's still, it's live for us to continue to redo when and as we might want to do this again, and to if anything has changed and how we can certainly learn from and understand it a bit better, because it's certainly a eye-opener for us to even understand what does this mean and what do we actually need to do about it and how do we reduce things. It was interesting to think around, the CO2 emissions that come off sheep and hens.
One thing I will add is, I know Valerie keeps saying about me and my spreadsheets and keeping records of everything, but I do keep records, and I have records back for years, but I really think that is so important to all of the the whole farm plan thing, as long as you've got all your information at hand, most of the stuff we found was quite easy to follow.
So thank you very much, Valerie, Christine and Cara. There was a question about doing soil analyses, and Valerie did say that you can carry these out yourself and then you would take them to SIUC or an SAC office. I think that's
SAC, yeah. That was another
say.
easy one to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for us it was easy because ultimately it's only on graded fields. We only have a couple of graded fields, and to do a couple, I would personally say it's hard work to do a W in a field with your tester. Physically, it took about, a bit of work to do, but once we had the soil, as I said, we purchased our kits off Amazon and we took them straight to Inverness, and they were very helpful. And we actually took up, I think, 2 kilos or two 1 kilo bags, and she actually only took 1 kilo off each of our fields from us. So she didn't need as much as we had read on their guidelines of what they actually require. That was the only thing that, she only took 1 bag off us of each field. But yeah, it was very easy to do, and I quite enjoyed doing that one and reading the results of the fields to know exactly what and how we can get better growth in our fields.
Doing soil sampling, and in a way, I was slightly naive with mine because I was just playing around with the whole carbon audit thing, and like I say, my soil sampling was sort of out of date and things like that. So the way that Valerie and Christine did it is I would say is the optimum way to do it, is to make sure if you've got your soil analysis first, that just makes life so much easier for you. And again, in terms of doing your soil sampling, so I'm not sure what kits you bought, Valerie, online and things like that, but generally you don't actually need, so we deliver sort of soil sampling training here and that, but you actually don't need really any kits. So as long as you've got some sort of agar just to get your sort of extraction of your soil, and again what they've said about walking the W, that type of thing. And again, generally really a little freezer bag of soil, and if you just mark up your fields, because when we're actually carrying out the actual physical soil sample test, we're only actually using sort of probably about that much soil in a test tube to get the results. So it's always fine to have a backup of soil just in case a test goes wrong, or we just want to make sure if there's been an error and things like that. But generally, so it's I used to work in agronomy, and I used to see people coming in with great big black bags. We come in of a Monday morning, we'd get these black bags appearing at the door, be like, crikey, kind of got half a field of somebody's soil. And, we actually, you only generally need, a little bit amount. But yeah, and definitely, sending your soil off for analysis is by far the best way to do it, because you get a really good report comes back with your soil as well, and tells you, about the nutrient values and things like that. So yeah.
Sarah was asking, does that apply to all the audits? And I think that was in reference to Cara saying that Scottish Government doesn't collate the information. The only one that you actually have to submit, Sarah, is the biodiversity audit. That they do collect. Well, I don't know if they collect it, but that one they do take in. The others, you just tick a box on your SAF that you've done it, and then you have to keep it in case they inspect. But that's all. As Cara says, they're not going to be comparing the one you did 5 years ago and the one you're doing now, etc., etc.
Can I answer? Hannah's got a question there about the GWP. So
Yeah.
I'm presuming that's the global warming potential, I think, is whoever put that in. So I do think that the Farm Carbon Toolkit did do an update the back end of last year, and I think they've got this marking system now. I think this is the GWP 100 or something, like grading. So I think they are now linking a lot of your audits to that, but I haven't quite got my head around it. So, but I think they are.
Donald,
Hello?
Bruce, and husband. That I actually used to work in climate change issues, so the assumptions that lie behind these models are really interesting to me. And the GWP asterisk takes account of how methane actually behaves in the atmosphere, and it's much more accurate for the sort of things we're doing with upland crofting, etc. But can I just say, we would share the views of the agriculture that Cara first said. The results it gave us, we think, this is ridiculous. We're running a very low input croft, and we would say something very, very similar to what Cara said.
Interesting, and that's actually
Yeah.
something I'm going to feed back to Scottish Government, that the results are different because they're recommending both tools for the same
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
But there's something going on.
I've
They're not
got
the
both
same.
documents. If anybody ever wants to see the both documents, I can show you
Okay.
both reports and how
Yeah.
they vary so vastly.
Yeah, no, we'll be passing that on for sure. I'm going to skip to Shona's question. It's a very practical question. Do you do an audit per croft or one for your BRN? It's just one for your business. Yeah,
Yeah.
Cara's agreeing with me there. Yeah. And then kind of on the same topic as the models, Morag is asking who built these apps / calculators. I know AgriCalc was built by SIUC, I think, wasn't it? And then Farm Carbon Calculator is like I mean, it's an independent organization, a social enterprise, I think, isn't it? But
Yeah.
Are you given in the models information up front as to what sort of things you need to have to hand before you begin, as it were? Because I mean, I think the second presentation stressed the point of having it all in your hand, as it were, when you start. Does the model actually tell you the sorts of things it's going to be asking you? And also, can you save it as you're going along, and can you go back and edit it?
Yeah.
And yes, yeah. So exactly the same as Valley, exactly the same with it, that you can, come in, spend 10 minutes, save it, and it will just store it. So again, when I did that demo one, it just saves it in my dashboard, so I can come in and, you can do the edit and things like that, and it can change bits and you can add bits into it and things like that. So yes, and again, I think in terms of the data, so livestock numbers, your management of your livestock, all that type of thing, that's really important. Again, fertilizers, manures, anything that you're putting on the land, make sure you've got all that information. Again, feed, if you're feeding and things like that, have all the information to hand. So as you know, roughly, quantities, this type of thing, and so that you can work it all out. And again, the energy side of it all, it really does want you to break down, exactly what you're using in terms of, oil, diesel, petrol, whatever it might be. Because, I suppose at the end of the day, anything is only as accurate as the information that you're putting into it. So, as Valerie and Christine, they were super efficient, and Christine with her spreadsheet has obviously made life so much easier because they can just extract that information straight over, which then makes it more time efficient for them as well, that they're not then having to scrabble around and try and find the information. So if it's something that you're thinking of doing within the next, say, 6 months, 9 months, whatever, just start planning it now. Really, if you've got a bit of record keeping, just get into the way of just keeping those records, and then, like, say, when you go to do your audit, it's a lot easier then to extract that information.
I was just going to say, obviously, once I get into it, I'll find out more. But this seems very farm based rather than croft based. Now, like where I live, I'm using a small croft, but then I use like a reseeding apportionment that's out on moorland, and then I have a common grazings, 3 different common grazings that I move my animals around, and then I have sublets which don't belong to me, but
I have apportionment, but that's not included. It's just the croft they ask for.
So
Interesting.
interestingly, my husband, as I said at the start, we've got a his and her. So my husband has done, he's on his, I think his second, maybe even third carbon audit now. But he actively used some of his apportionments are almost classed now as almost in buy. So, they used, almost, daily. So we did include those, but I fully understand what you're saying, because I think part of our frustration with these whole carbon audits is there's a lot about what we're putting out, but actually, there's grounds where, like you're saying about, heather ground and different bits and pieces, and, there's areas where, it's retaining carbon, but there's not a way of measuring that figure is, not, being, included. And I think that, I would say from a personal point of view, with the carbon audits at the moment, I don't think they're given a true representation of, the croft model.
Yeah,
think
I
it'll be
agree
quite
with you there,
difficult to
Cara. Yeah, because my apportionment has been reseeded in the past as well, and it's quite like one of some of my fields, but it's classed as an apportionment, and it's not on my croft; it's on the common grazing.
Yeah.
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 I think it'd be quite hard for me to explain how I'm cutting 300 mini bales of silage from a 4-acre croft, and
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
when the shovel
Yeah.
bits of land.
We can feed back again, though. I think it's yeah, we can try and
A tab.
I'm not
Oh,
sure
a
what
drop
difference
down
it
tab.
makes. What's that?
A drop down tab. Croft
Yeah.
apportionments.
Yeah.
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 Thanks, Madani. There's a question. Archie's asking, is there a paper option? I'm pretty sure not, because of the calculators, but I don't know if anyone knows any different. Cara, do you know any different?
No, I've not seen any paper versions. When we've done demos here, we have sort of tried to print off pages just to, to give people an idea of it, but not for actually inputting the information. It all seems to be digital.
Sorry, yeah, just a quick question. So see, with regards to the form filling, so obviously we can do it online, but the older crofters, the older generations, so could they go to what we would call the DAF's office just to get someone to help them to fill this in?
Yeah, so we've run workshops here. It wasn't the farm toolkit though, it was the AgriCalc. We ran workshops here probably, I don't know, a couple of months ago now. And we had pretty much the most of our crofting township came along, and we actually had an advisor that came in and actually sat and literally took them all through their carbon audit. So, we've certainly done it here. So I think that there is potentially there is a way that it can be done. And like I say, we certainly, we had a training room with about 15 crofters all with their laptops, and, we were, taking them through it all. And like I say, we had an advisor in, and, just literally just took them all through it. So they all literally ended by the end of the day with a carbon audit completed. So, I think there is a way of doing it, but again, I suppose it's just, see what your, your townships are looking like, and, what your agricultural departments, if they've got scope, or whether it's, Scottish Crofting Federation, or whether it's Farm Advisory Service, maybe, just see what help is out there. But if I would say if there's a need, I would be pushing for, some support, for them to help them get it done.
Yeah, I would go to the department and say, and then the more people that go, the more they'll realize that that support's needed. So, and they might be able to support it. It'll probably depend on the office.
The majority of the crofters here are kind of old school, shall I say, so they don't really do the whole the laptops, internet, that kind of a thing. But yeah, that's good to give a shout to.
We have laptops here as part of the training, so we just got them all set up on laptop. It was hilarious. It was just like the first, probably a couple of hours was just, it would have made quite a good comedy movie.
But I think that's something we'll feed back as well, to be honest with you. It's not really available to everybody, is it? As it if it's only available online.
I don't kind of feel that it is, no, but
No.
thanks for answering that anyway.
Sif is asking, is undrained, undisturbed peatland recorded? I think it's only the land that you claim for under your SAF, so I don't think you would be claiming for peatland, is that? Am I answering that right, Cara?
Yeah, I'm
Or-
just reading the question. So, is undrained, undisturbed peatland recorded? It depends if it's on your croft. If it's on your croft, you know, I would imagine under the suspension tabs there would be something that you could put in about peatland.
Would it not be only if it's actually in the fields that you claim for?
I don't know, because I suppose it just,
Or
yeah,
is it your
goes
whole
on.
croft? Is it your whole
Yeah,
croft?
yeah. I don't know. I would take advice on that one. I wouldn't like to give a yes or a no on that. If it's most of the croft, then I would add it if it's most of the croft.
I'm just preparing. I'm getting sheep soon, hopefully, and I am probably gonna graze a very small number on the peat bog where I was advised not to plant trees.
Okay, yes, no, that makes sense. And that's not common grazing, that's your croft, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, in that case, yeah, you would include it in that case.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for everyone for coming. I hope you've got your questions answered. I hope for most of you the carbon audit seems a little bit more manageable. Thanks, Christine, Cara, and Valerie.